Huh, that was pretty cool, is what I thought when I closed the window after finishing a 30-minute, little-known indie horror quote-unquote experience game. A couple of months before that, I came across this video game while I was searching for some good games to play. It looked intriguing as it had a title that induced a sense of mystery, which, along with its cover image, gave it a serial experiments lane I'm too cool for conventional narratives kind of vibe. Which I totally dig, by the way. I put it on my backlog and revisited it a couple of weeks ago, and as it's probably evident from my opening sentiment, I didn't think too much about it at first. It was cool and it reminded me of Dark Souls. I thought that was it and deleted the game from my computer. Why, then, did this game that left nothing more than a mediocre impression on me the first time through continue to haunt my thoughts for the rest of the week? This 30-minute, little-known indie horror quote-unquote experience game is an experience that I will never forget. It's an experience I've played through over 10 times and one that I've mulled over, in my mind, over 100. But the weirdest part is that I still have no clue what the fuck 0_abyssal somewhere is even about. It's dead. It's somewhere strange. It wakes up. A dream. You are a knight in rusty armor. You wake up in a strange room with two giant concrete structures shaped like wheels. The only light present in the room is emanated from the said wheels. There's a hum of fluorescent lights or some other familiar machinery, although neither are visible. You make your way outside of this room through a hole behind the wheels and find yourself on a narrow path. The hallway, or whatever this space is unclear to you. In fact, all of what you've seen in this game confuses you. Huge concrete wheels emanating light? A knight waking up in what seems like modern-day bathroom tiles? What is this hallway? Every 5 steps or so, you see them. Giant statues with these glowing, emotionless white masks. Is this a prison? Or a factory? Or something entirely different from what you've ever seen? An inscription you find on a rusted gate tells you the following, quote, "One cannot tell if this is a shrine, cell, or catacombs. Evenly spread, a stillness goes, all the way through the depths," end quote. This is the first 3 or so minutes of the game. If it sounds interesting to you, please pause this video and download the game and play it for yourself. Come back here after you're done. I'll wait. Oh, and I know most of you won't leave, so I implore you to check the game out at least after the video is over. It's one of those games where spoilers don't really matter. So please do. The link is in the description down below. Thanks. 0_abyssal somewhere is, for the 3rd time now, a 30-minute, little-known indie horror quote-unquote experience game developed by the Spanish indie game developer No Noise. It's available for download for free on PC through itch.io. It came out in 2018, and from the little more than a handful of reviews I could find on Twitter, Reddit, and itch.io, it's clear to see that this game has been crowned as an unknown gem by pretty much everyone who's ever played it. The itch.io download page for the game states the following lines with an eerie lack of context. Following an ancient star, facing others' shades, strolling through an abyssal place, the memories, pains, and regrets of the old sunken realm. And so, Buckle in, boys, as I take you through my video essay analysis and attach a deep meaning relating to the meaning of life into this video game. Let's go! Abyssal Somewhere takes you to a lot of places in its minuscule amount of time, or at least compared to most video games nowadays. From the hallways of giant statues, to a stranded piece of highway in the abyss, to a massive desert that's inhabited by ruins of an old castle. It is an experience hard to describe in words. For one, it takes a lot of inspiration from loads of media that I love. The Souls-likeness of it is obvious from the footage I'm showing on screen. The knight treks through the game as his armor clings and clangs with each step, resonating somewhere deep within my soul. Some of the locations, especially in the latter half of the game, borrow the aesthetic of the ruins from Dark Souls. Conceptually too, Abyssal Somewhere features the journey of an unnamed quote-unquote ironclad being making a pointless voyage with unclear objectives. You do have combat in the game, but calling it combat feels too giving. The knight slowly and methodically draws his sword high and slashes it at his opponents with what seems like all his might. His opponents too are mainly frail and weak creatures who go down with a singular attack. Well, go down is one way to say it, I guess. Although it takes inspiration from Dark Souls, it is not an RPG. In fact, Abyssal Somewhere feels like a survival horror game. At certain points, the camera is fixed at an angle, which is iconic to the survival horror genre. You run slow, and as stated earlier, your attacks are slow as well. But although in aesthetics it might as well be an avant-garde survival horror, it isn't really a survival horror game. Instead, it uses the genre conventions to deceive you. As a game review site called Death Drive so eloquently puts it, if something was chasing me, I was too busy anxiously pushing forward to find out. The survival horror genre conventions aren't the only thing that Abyssal Somewhere takes from Silent Hill. If you've played any of the Silent Hill games, but especially if you've played Silent Hill 2, you will immediately realize what I'm talking about, that being atmosphere. Atmosphere is a side of art that I've not seen enough explicit discussions of, but implicitly seen everywhere. Take for example Stanley Kubrick's horror classic, The Shining. A huge part of why The Shining works as well as it does is because of how masterfully Kubrick constructs his shots to impregnate the audience's minds with a latent sense of unease. With a slow burn plot like The Shining's, Kubrick fills the runtime with shots like these, using wide-angle lenses to emphasize the sheer size of the Overlook Hotel and to evoke a feeling of isolation within the viewers. This helps to further communicate the internal turmoils of the main character due to the said isolation. That, alongside incredible set and sound design, helps to subtly but impactfully convey the overwhelming sense of utter psychological horror. This is what is known as atmospheric horror. It's an elusive kind of horror which is achieved through ways that feel superficial and unrelated at first, but which come together to set a mood of sheer dread. Seriously, atmosphere goes a long way in horror media. Think of how the film The Lighthouse by Robert Eggers crafts sequences that perturbs the viewers and makes them feel uneasy using the boxed aspect ratio and the black and white textured visuals.
Let Neptune strike ye dead, Winslow! Hark! Hark! Triton!
If you don't realize how crucial and effective atmospheric horror is, and atmosphere is, then just look at the case of Silent Hill 2 and Silent Hill 2 HD. I say it like that and not like Silent Hill 2 and its HD remaster because they might as well be different games entirely. Silent Hill 2 puts you in the shoes of James Sunderland, a middle-aged dude with a severe emotional baggage who visits the town of Silent Hill after getting a letter from his dead wife asking him to do so. The town of Silent Hill is covered with dense fog. This fog makes it so that you may know what's in front of you, but not quite be able to make it out. That, along with the fantastic sound design, the grimy textures, the dark set design, and the slow and rusty combat all come together to elicit a sharp sense of paranoia as you slowly make your way through the game. The HD collection entirely misses what made Silent Hill so memorable in the first place. The prime instance of this can be seen in how the fog now simply exists in the foreground, with its boundaries being clearly visible to us as if James was walking with a huge glass box over him which kept the fog out. The HD version, while making the textures and assets more polished for a newer generation, completely does away with all the subtle atmosphere building and grimy details that had done a surprisingly huge amount of work in producing the said sense of dread in the original. A great atmosphere can scare the shit out of people even if there is no threat whatsoever in the entirety of the game. And Abyssal Somewhere is such a game. Although there are certain moments of sudden jump scares and flashing lights and loud noises, outside all of them, the most frightened I felt while playing the game were during the times where it just left me alone to slowly explore these bizarre spaces I found myself in. The reverberating clashes of the knight's armor along with his jagged movements, strolling through what at times seems like endless spaces, felt oppressive, as if I myself had fallen into this world that I cannot understand, a world that is not made for me. To describe the spaces that the game puts you into, I'd use the word odd. As I stated earlier, the game starts off with the knight waking up in a room that resembles a giant bath hall with tiles that can be seen in bathrooms, and yet there is something off about this. One, you are a medieval knight waking up in this room that looks like something from after your time. Secondly, there are these huge wheels. You could go close to them and inspect them, upon which the text that shows up on screen says that they are quote-unquote row slabs of concrete and have light being produced from their surfaces. Then there is this corridor you stumble upon. This corridor is even more confusing. The path is narrow, and on the other side of the path there is this empty space that you could fall down on only if there weren't these iron rods that prevent you from doing so. What is the purpose of this space? What about the statues? The architecture present here is brutalist and grunge. You see, we make buildings for a reason. Your house is built for people to live in it. Your office space or classroom is built for their respective uses, although they aren't exclusive to them. But the architecture found in Abyssal Somewhere has no discernible aesthetic or practical value, as if the people who made them, or the uses for which they were built for, were something so far removed from human understanding. Throughout the game, we return to this hallway of giants a total of 3 times, provided that the hallway does not remain the same. When I wandered through those halls, I could not help but recall the incredible works of Tsutomu Nihei. Nihei, for those of you who are unaware, is a mangaka who's notorious for his peculiar and conventional style of storytelling, and also well known for his fantastic world design. His first manga, by the name of Blame, or Blam, published by Kodansha, has amassed a cult following on the internet. The biggest specialty to Nihei's work can be seen if we look at Blam. Blam follows the journey of Killy, a young man with an overpowered gun who's, well... You see, Nihei stories are confusing by design. We are pushed into a narrative at what seems like the midway of the story. Character introductions, establishing the setting and the main conflict of the story, exposition in order to get the reader caught up on what is going on in the story. Yeah, buddy, go back to mommy. Nihei disorientates the readers by shoving them straight into the thick of it and does not flinch. And that's not just it. Nihei's worlds are usually gargantuan, filled with enormous brutalist landscapes and nightmarish monsters inhabiting them. Reading his stories, you feel uncomfortable, as if you are not who the story is meant for, as if you are not welcome to the worlds and characters Nihei creates. Although there is criticism to be made there, since writing stories that alienates the reader isn't exactly a super galaxy-brained thing to do as a writer trying to sell those very stories, but that's the very reason why Nihei has a cult following. This feeling of disorientation makes up for some incredibly emotional experiences that you cannot get elsewhere. And it is the same disorientation that's felt in Abyssal Somewhere, as you traverse through these uncanny and withdrawn places that makes no intellectual sense. I'd like to make a note that when I say Abyssal and Nihei confuse you, I don't mean it in a derogatory way. You can easily write gibberish, and technically that too will confuse the audience. However, it's clear that Nihei and Abyssal are deliberately indulging in this confusion. This deliberate confusion and the other kind of confusion can sometimes be hard to tell apart, but in the case of Abyssal Somewhere, it is pretty clear that it falls under the former from the fact that Abyssal has a cohesive story and idea it's trying to convey, just in an intentionally obscure way. As for why? We'll get into that later. Another notable aspect of design is sound. From what I can understand, the mystery book of instructions.txt that you get alongside the game if you download it from itch.io, most, if not all sounds, are free to use sounds found on freesounds.com. But free or not, they are used in a way that seriously adds a whole new dimension to the game. Each and every action taken by the knight is followed by an eerie and uncomfortable loud sound effect. Just listen to the scene where the knight painstakingly opens a rusted iron door. The sound pierces your ears and reminds you that you do not know this place, and that this place probably is not made to be known by you. In fact, each and every action is like this, whether it be removing a mysteriously shiny white harpoon from one of the giant statues to cracking the wire that's holding up a dead body onto a door you may want to pass through. Oh, don't you worry, we'll get to that later. Hell, even attacking aggressive enemies makes this ear-piercing, otherworldly sound that begs you to stop doing so and forces you to question what in the hell is going on in this game, and why are you even here, and what has your life become as you stare away at your computer, feeling scared because Polygon Man goes through polygon hallways made of polygon giant statues. Sound effects on the player's actions are not the only way sound is used in this game. In almost all the areas of the game, there is always some sort of ambient sound. Think back to the beginning of the game where I described the tube light-like hum that fills the room. All throughout the game, there are these unsettling sounds playing in the background. Sometimes they're roaring winds of the desert, and at other times, sound goes a long way in this game, and by the very end, everything collapses into what I can only describe auditory gut vomit. I don't know, those are the words that came into my mind when I heard the audio. But for me personally, a notable instance of a sound in a game sticking with me for hours after playing is this. This is the scream of the void. As you progress through the hallway of giants and make your way into more indescribable areas with similar architecture, you realize that where you are is seemingly nowhere. You drop down into this bridge-like structure and all around you is nothing. You are completely isolated in the middle of absolute blackness until you see the lights. This is something that happens multiple times in this game if you stop to notice it. You're standing in darkness and you can't really make out where to go except for this mysterious light in the distance. Here it looks like street lights and elsewhere it's just a little dot of light, and then you encounter these funny little fellas. Look at how they are designed. From a distance they glow bright white. Some of them attack you and block your way, forcing you to attack them back, which makes them suddenly transform into these black and white slurry things. You can't interact with any of them but one. The first one you encounter. You can press X to quote-unquote talk, but then the text on the screen reads, quote, "The person engulfed in shades is silent. Its mouth is shut in noise." I feel sorry for these beings. For one, if you look at them closely, you can see that their arms are mangled when they try to push you off the ledge. It makes you feel like they're doing so out of agony. They can't talk, and neither do they have any other sort of indication that they are a person. They are incomprehensible beings, pointed out by their design and how they're described by oxymorons. They embody the space we are in as a whole, a perplexing mixture of the void and the light. If you head forward even more, you'll find more of these beings of shades, this time holding what seems to be harpoons or fishing sticks or some kind of long staff with wires attached to the end. And if you make it even more ahead, you'd find yourself jumping onto an isolated piece of road. A modern day road. At this point, you've given up on making sense of stuff. At this point, it is just pure disorientation. At this point, the name Abyssal Somewhere begins to make sense. This following quote from the novel Kafka on the Shore best describes how I felt. I am naked and defenseless and utterly confused. At times like that, I always feel an omen calling out to me, like a dark, omnipresent pool of water. The game indulges in surrealism in order to make you feel unwelcome, stupid, and powerless by putting you in the dark abyss and making you hurt these beings and leading you through these incomprehensible spaces, all the while using light as a carrot on a stick to lure the donkey. But with all its surrealism and dream-like nature, Abyssal Somewhere does have a story to tell. A story that, before delving into, I'd like to push aside to briefly talk about something else first. And the something else's relevance will soon be apparent as we begin to take a closer look upon it. I'm of course talking about the 1985 Mamoru Oshii's Tenshi no Tamago, or Angel's Egg. Angel's Egg is an hour and 11-minute long anime film that came out at a high time for Japan's 80s bubble economy. Nowadays, Angel's Egg is considered a cult classic and often discussed in old anime circles. So what is Angel's Egg? Well, so there's this girl with an egg who's going somewhere, and then there's this boy with the cross weapon kind of thing, and these two travel through a city that was or is flooded. If that sounded boring to you, or, well, confusing, well then, yeah. If it isn't obvious already, Angel's Egg is an avant-garde, surrealist anime OVA directed by the person who would go on to direct the highly influential and world-renowned Ghost in the Shell. And if you've seen Ghost in the Shell, it isn't that big of a surprise to learn that Oshii has also directed this film 10 years prior, as although not so much in Ghost in the Shell, Oshii's contemplative and unconventional style of storytelling can be seen to be all cranked up to the max in Angel's Egg. Quote, "Surrealism aims to revolutionize human experience. It balances a rational vision of life with one that asserts the power of the unconscious and dreams. Surrealists find magic and strange beauty in the unexpected and the uncanny, the disregarded and the unconventional. At the core of their work is the willingness to change imposed values and norms, and a search for freedom. And Oshii does not shy away from this strange beauty with Angel's Egg. Throughout the 70-minute experience, there are these deafeningly quiet moments that find you in deep contemplations that are followed with roaring exclamation points that lure you straight back in. The mise-en-scène of Angel's Egg is cruel. It's completely adorned in deep blacks and dark blues. It features a city stone cold and asleep in its appearance. A city where these stone-like citizens come out to fish at night, only that the fish they chase is nothing more than shadows. The boy and the girl converse about a flood and how the rain wouldn't stop. They talk about Noah's Ark, only that in the end, the holy flood overtakes everything in its entirety. The story that Angel's Egg tells us is one that brings no hope. The Angel's Egg, the egg that will save them all, is empty inside. The story that Angel's Egg tells us is one shrouded in the sheer, oppressive despair that's portrayed through this gargantuan orb of statues that emerge from the deep, cold, and uncaring waters. The story that Angel's Egg tells us is... I don't know. There are many ways to make sense of Angel's Egg. It could be about hopelessness and how all our hopes are akin to the egg that the girl carries around, hopeful, yet in the end, easily shattered and empty inside. It could be about how the sheer insignificance of our self-aggrandizing existence, like how the camera zooms out to show how the ocean and the boy and the city are just little creases on a block of stone. It could be about Oshii's personal loss of faith in Christianity, since just before beginning the production of the OVA, Oshii had planned and eventually decided not to join a seminary due to his consequent despondency. The relevance of Angel's Egg to our discussion of Abyssal Somewhere should be apparent by now. Abyssal 2 speaks of a sunken kingdom. It shows an endless rain and speaks of the subsequent flood that sank the kingdom. Pretty early on, I mentioned the cadaver you came across as you traversed the Brutalist structure. Upon cutting the wire that was holding up the body to the door you presumably want to pass through, the body drops a stone scripture it was holding. Quote, "It tells of how it rained, and how they were sorry, and of weeping, and to please stop the water." Abyssal Somewhere also draws pretty obvious inspirations from Angel's Egg with its own rendition of the stone fisherman people. We too encounter these beings of shade with harpoons and fishing sticks. And like Angel's Egg, they are there to tell a lamentation of a civilization dead and long gone. And even though I know this, even though I realize the connections with Angel's Egg and even rewatched Angel's Egg multiple times for this video, I'm incredibly ashamed to say I have no idea what either of them are about. I realize that this video is entering its last portion, and believe me, I try to keep my videos at a 3-act structure so that it starts with intrigue and ends with the question solved and some sort of an emotional climax, or at least I try my very best to, but for this story, I don't know. Oshii has stated that he doesn't know what Angel's Egg is about. Abyssal Somewhere is not a finished story. At the end of the game, it is revealed that the dev is working on another game, titled Tower of Many, and from their Twitter page it seems to be a sequel, or at the very least a spiritual sequel, to Abyssal Somewhere. But it is still in development and has been since Abyssal was released. And hey, developing a game is no flick of a finger, and especially a game as conceptually rich and atmospherically masterful as this one, I'll be happy even if the dev never completes the game. I wish all the best for No Noise, as being an indie dev is incredibly hard. But as for this video, I'm perplexed. With the knowledge of this video in mind, Abyssal Somewhere seems to be an incomplete game. And as much as I do have the urge to tie this all together into some vague theme of finding meaning in the meaningless world, I can't. It seems, in the end, that this video too will stay incomplete. So, I've been reading Haruki Murakami's Kafka on the Shore. If you've been paying attention, you'd recall that I quoted the book earlier. It's a really good book, and I haven't finished it yet as of making the video, but I've been enjoying my time with it very much, and recommend you pick it up too if you like reading little weird books. Anyways, so after I wrote the last section of this video, I seriously did not know how to move forward. And then I was reading more of the novel the other day, and I came across this conversation between characters of the book, which I think can deepen our discussion here. It's taken out of context, but I don't think that the context matters for our purposes. So yeah, it reads, quote, "Works that have a certain imperfection to them have an appeal for that very reason. There's something in it that draws you in. More than more fully realized works. You discover something that tugs at your heart. Or maybe we should say that the work discovers you. Does art need to make sense to you? Or does it even have to be made for you? Are questions that surrealists and expressionists ask. Playing through Abyssal Somewhere, which I've done for over a dozen times now just to get some kind of an answer for this fucking video, you get these bits and pieces about this long and gone civilization, about the giants who taught the humans about Haven and the underworld, about a headless giant arriving with the flood, and these bald and pithy exclamations about death and regret, about how the water in the end suppresses everything forever. But yet still, the whole experience feels like invading someone else's world. Like suddenly waking up in a different time, in a different world, in which you have no idea how to traverse. Like attending a middle school exam and being given a question paper meant for someone else with a master's degree to answer. The game isn't for you. Neither is it for me, or any of us. The game is imperfect and incomplete. It has no beginning, nor does it really have an end. It has no villains, nor enemies. There's no one to save or be saved from. Abyssal Somewhere is just that. Abyssal Somewhere. It confuses you, disorientates you, and in the end turns a cold shoulder when you expect answers. It dives deep into the uncanny and the unsettling, and it perches down there in the abyss, in the cold. In the end, the only thing it stops to do is ask you, why should a game make sense to you? Why should a game be about something? We humans don't like confusion. We want to be on top of stuff. We want to be computer-brained giga geniuses, and we despise complex situations that cannot be explained away easily by a theory or a concept. Or, in other words, we think too much and feel too little. Nihei, the surrealist Oshii, and the central subject for this video, Zero_Abyssal Somewhere, dropkicks us into a world that manifests this fear of uncertainty and doubt. It grabs us by our ankles and laughs at our feeble attempts to make sense. But death is so much more than cold. It's no fairy tale. They're cold, fossilized existences, and no one sees for them. And it's still like that. Under sands and under waters, and under regrets and under fears, and to wander and to wonder what it takes, where it takes, to be the other. Zero_Abyssal Somewhere is a game that made me feel frightened. It has made me feel lonely and cold. It has made me feel unwelcome, like an outsider looking in. It has made me feel stupid and powerless. It has made me feel disoriented and otherized, like an alien invading a planet far away. It has made me feel things that I cannot put into words. And I still have no idea what it is about. And I love it for the very same reason. Sorry folks, no video essay analysis and deep meaning relating to the meaning of life in this video game. Or kinda? I don't know, thanks for watching this mess. If you enjoyed this video, please like the video and subscribe to the channel because, you know, it really helps me out and it motivates me because I really like making videos, and your likes and subscribes mean that you want more, and that makes me really happy. Do subscribe and do all that stuff. Follow me on Twitter, and yeah, stick around for more stuff like this in the future. Hopefully. I don't know, life can be weird sometimes. Anyways, thank you for watching once again. With all of that said, I'd like to stop recording and say goodbye to you one more time. Goodbye.